Ming are merciless with their new entry-level watch. A-Lang and Zona hit the big 3-0. eBay and Zodiac cross swords, and much more in this episode of the Scottish Watches podcast.
Well, Dave, as you're listening to this, is currently in Asia.
Shame it's not euthanasia.
Well, I mean, yes, let's go with that.
You're definitely not a youth. Indeed. But we should probably talk about some watches. And before we do that, we're going to tell you to check the show notes. We forgot to tell you to do that in the last episode. Click the link in your podcast player or in the YouTube video description. I'll take you to our website. All the pictures, text, spec, and links will be there for all the news stories, the new releases, and all the bullshit that we're going to talk about. And we have got 2 shows a week, generally in audio format. Usually one show appears on YouTube, but the other one doesn't. So if you're only watching this on YouTube, you're missing half the stories. 2 shows a week. One's an interview show, one is news, current affairs, general industry news, stuff like that. And for the next few weeks, I reckon we will not have much on YouTube because Dave's travelling, I'm travelling, there's lots of things happening, but we will consistently put the audio out. So make sure you're subscribed on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and other places where you can find podcasts. Now, we should probably start off, as we mean to go on, with a cool watch from a cool brand. And we got to spend a bit of time with these guys over the past few months. I was with them in Hong Kong and we got to meet them at Geneva Watch Days. Do you want to hit the road running and tell us about this new entry-level Ming?
Now, we say entry-level because I guess this is more back to roots is how I would describe it, because when this brand started off, very much it was about really nicely put together, nicely engineered, nicely styled aesthetic watches that were in the relatively affordable category. But of course, over the years, the brand has developed, built, and they've got a bit fancy boots with some of their watches, some real kind of innovative work in terms of providing skeletonizing and other movement complications and techniques and technologies that they've brought to the fore, maybe at prices that are still a lot higher than their original watches were, but were more affordable than the traditional Swiss watch industry would give. So this is I would say a back.
I'm going to jump in there because I'm going to forget if I wait for this to continue down this road. You're talking about the price point. This is something that Barbara brought up over at Horology Forum in Hong Kong because Ming was there and this new watch just got released as their talk was going on. And she asked the question that this is their entry-level price point watch, but the watch they released when it first came out was significantly cheaper. And she asked why that was the case, and it wasn't inflation because that wouldn't triple the cost or more. And what Ming actually said was that they vastly underestimated the cost of creating a watch company. They looked at it, looked at the product, added the figures together, came up with a price point. They didn't factor in customer services, logistics, returns, cost of doing business. And the big one that he talked about was very open and transparent about it. The big one was when they made their first watch, they didn't realise that everything that worked fine in the prototype would not come to fruition with the final product. And they get screwed by about 60% of the parts needing reworked, re-put together, stripped down, rebuilt, and it absolutely screwed them almost to the point where another watch might not come out. So there'll be some links in the show notes to a video where he gets down and dirty about the watch industry and how intricate it can be to remain in business.
And I think that's fair. They were a brand new brand. They were trying to bring super value to the market. But as so often happens, people grossly underestimate all of the hidden costs. I mean, this is their entry-level watch. Let's be straight here. It's 3,250 Swiss francs, which is not an inconsiderable amount of money, but at the same time, for where a lot of the Ming product is at the moment, it is definitely their entry-level price point. They have no watches that are cheaper. The bulk of their watches are more expensive, so I think it's still a fair point to make. We also need to bear in mind their entry-level watches were quite a few years ago now, not 1 or 2, probably stretching towards double figures, maybe not quite there yet, but not that far away. And of course, they do a lot more work in their watches now, some innovation when it comes to dials, hands, and of course within the movements, they're no longer using basic movements off the shelf. They're doing a lot of kind of additional work, including in this watch, which has got some nice kind of basic skeletonizing, some custom work on skeletonizing the rotor, and a few other little tricks up its sleeve. They're also investing in technologies and ways of doing things that maybe haven't been done before. And that's where this watch, the 37.02 Minimalist, comes into play. There's a wee trick up its sleeve, one that is a wee bit subtle, but once you see it or once you hear about it, you think, oh, that's a good point. And what is that? It's the lume that they've used. They've managed, they believe, to be the first company to produce a watch that has illumination that is pure white. So when it glows, it doesn't have a tinge of blue, green, or any other colour, or off-white even, but it is a pure bright white lume.
They said this as well, and I kept quiet because I wasn't sure, but the Christopher Ward moon phase that I've got, I think it's a C1, that's completely white, but I didn't want to say anything because I wasn't on stage.
Interesting as to whether I can attest to that. I cannot, because I've not seen them side by side, but it seems that a lot of people that have seen this watch, and I put my hands up, I haven't seen it in person yet, but I've seen plenty of pictures of it, but it does give the impression that rather than the lume glowing, it almost looks like it's very strongly backlit with a strong white light. So it's quite an impressive little setup they've got, and they've got one of the hands, I think it's the hour hand, that's solid white lume, and the minute hand has a lume track kind of edging to it. We all like a bit of edging, but yes, a nice bright white clean edge to it. And as you know, Ricky, when you get into the edging, it has to be clean and fair play. But outside that, lots of similarities to the original two pieces, which you could say this is either the successor or the kind of iteration of those models, the 17.02 and the 27.02. This follows on, obviously, with a 3 in the front Sellita movement, but as I mentioned before, a little bit more work than would just be an off-the-shelf Sellita these days. You've got 100 meters of water resistance, you've got 45 hours of power reserve, so lots of relatively standard features, but there are lots of watches in and around this price point powered by, well, shall we say, much more generic versions of the Sellita movement than this is. It's a cool looking watch. If you like the Ming aesthetic, this will probably be right up your street.
I do like this one. I got to have a look at it properly. I think we actually got a sneaky peek of it over at Geneva Watch Days, but there was so much stuff going on. There was some lume technology, there was really lightweight things, were really heavy things put in front of us. This watch is cool. It's got that design aesthetic that Ming put into everything that is very unique. Other people have tried to duplicate it slightly. There are similar looks and feels with maybe Satari Bullard and a few others, but Ming just keep doing what they do. And the skeletonization on the back, the almost Vanta Black look to the front with that crazy lume, the breakout, almost like a Tron or a video game style with the outer sort of minute track, and everything about it is just really, really well put together. Price point, it's not mega expensive, it's entry level, but I mean, what is entry level with Tudor? What is entry level with Omega and some of the other brands? It's not Christopher Ward territory because there's more to it, but yeah, I do like it. And that leads on to me catching up with Ming and Co. over in Hong Kong. We had Hind Siddiqui and Barbara on the show just a number of weeks ago. They're talking about this free to attend event, the travelling roadshow version that happens every couple of years when things aren't happening in Dubai. This time around, it was over in Hong Kong. Never been there before myself. Wouldn't have expected to ever be there, but because all our friends were across, from the media side of things, from the internet, from YouTube even, it was good to experience a little bit of sunlight, a little bit of warmth, although it was just a little bit too warm, 32 degrees outside. But yeah, lots of travel to get there. No direct flights from Scotland that I could find, so it was a case of hop across to Dubai and then from Dubai across to Hong Kong. Well over 20 hours in the air, plus stop-offs and all the rest of it. Changeover in Dubai, as I said. But getting there and chilling out for the first day, acclimatizing, sorting out the travel body clock and the jet lag. When the event itself actually started, it reminded me of what it was like a couple of years ago over New York. The things they put on, the talks that they've got, the master classes that they have that you can get involved in. And this is a smaller version of what you would get at Dubai Watch Week, where me and Dave have been there a number of times already. Look forward to next year because, as was explained to us, next year around, when it's back in Dubai, it's going to be twice the size of the previous event. I don't know if it was 100,000 square foot previously and it's up to 200,000, but I think those are the figures that were banded around. They're moving the venue, the location, because the place they were in before is far too small for the amount of brands, the amount of people, and the amount of activities they want to put on. So keep an eye out for details of that coming soon. But I believe it's going to be near or in and around Dubai Mall, not inside, but an area that they have that they can utilise. So that means that you're going to have boutiques, you're going to have amenities, you're going to have car parking, and it's going to be easier for the people within Dubai to get to. Because at the financial district, it seemed to be quite tricky. That was what some of the people told me while I was there. But anyway, back to the case in point. Horology Forum 10, HF10, it was brilliant. So many people were along, so many guests, so many speakers, so many brands were involved. Not showcasing watches or talking about themselves in that way, but being part of the interactive chats that were also live streamed on YouTube. Bit of a pain in the arse if you weren't there and you want to find out more about it. You have to go to the Dubai Watch Week website or Instagram, and then you click on live. It's not in the main video part, and this is such a pain on YouTube to find things. Click on live and then scroll down and you can actually watch all the things. And you'll see me down the front being a pain in the arse trying to take photos and having tripods in the way and getting ushered along to the side because they didn't like that. Dave, did you catch up with any of the stuff that was happening there? Were you far too busy?
Unfortunately, I have been far too busy. I literally got back to the desk, the studio, a mere 1 day ago, and in around 12 hours from now, I am shooting off again. But I am planning to actually tag a few of those things on my iPad because I have some serious long haul flying coming up, and there's only so much of that silly little screen you can watch in a plane before you have to actually watch things on a good screen. So I will be tagging a few to catch up with as I head towards Asia myself.
There's definitely a few of them you want to download and check out while you're travelling because they're well worth a listen to. So day one, I think it was 3 events on that day. Travelled from the hotel, which was literally 4 minutes down the road. They always have everything nearby. Shruti and the team know what they're doing when they're putting this together. And if you're travelling, coming across to these events as a member of the public, not a member of the media, you get exactly the same access as me, Dave, or the guy that runs any of the watch companies that we speak about gets. It is complete open access. You can wander up to people afterwards. You can chat to them. I had a chat with the founder of Resonance because when he was doing a talk, he mentioned one of his favourite watches was the Bulova Accutron 214 Spaceview, a watch that I've talked about in the show that I own myself. So I pulled him to the side to have a quick chat about it afterwards. He loves the technology. And if you've seen a Resonance watch, especially the kind of smartwatch, the digital crossover version, you'll understand what I mean. So things kicked off properly on Tuesday, and the event space that everything was happening in is owned by Christie's, and I believe it's called the Henderson Building. Very space age, very new, very cool looking. And we went in there. Everything was set out perfectly. You had an area that you could have refreshments, you had an area you could chill out and chat to people, and then you had the auditorium where all the talks and the interactive things were happening, plus a classroom to the back where you could get hands-on and do cool things. The first talk was called Is the Age of Mechanical Innovation Over? And you had Pim from Christian Vanderklaus there, you had Nicholas, the Heritage Director from TAG, and you had JX from SGX, the website that talks about all the new releases and has some great articles on it. Some of the discussions there were, have we reached the end of mechanical ingenuity? And everybody agreed, no we haven't, because every year something else comes out. It could be Zenith with their oscillator, same as Frederic Constant. It could be Spring Drive from Seiko, Grand Seiko, a number of decades ago. I think it's 20 years this year. Ceramics, sapphire technology, solar technology, quartz technology, supercapacitors, all that kind of stuff. And they weren't just talking about the new things, they were talking about some of the missteps along the way. And the guys from TAG actually commented on some of the products that they've had out in the past. Maybe there was a watch that had a rubber belt inside it that if you didn't constantly use it, it would gum up and jump teeth. They talked about the Zenith Inventor, which obviously it was a watch I was after, put my name down for, and it never really materialised. A couple of them did appear, but then quickly evaporated. So that was pretty cool. A little bit of talk about fluids within watches. HYT wasn't brought up, but there was another company that was. And again, links will be in the show notes to this video. Recommend you go and have a watch and a listen to it because it was pretty damn cool. And the next cool thing I was involved in was getting my hands dirty with Lume, as in applying Lume to hands. Me and Dave were across at LV a couple of months ago there, getting hands-on, literally, with applying hands to watches. And that was tricky, but applying Lume to the tiny holes, the apertures in watch hands is even harder. But we managed to do that. Myself, Barbara, and all the team that were there, we managed to apply it. And I may actually have something here. Let me go and have a wee look. So this here is the fruit of my labours. This is the result of what I'm talking about here, where we got some hands, we had to knock the original Lume out from the hand, crack it off, and then apply new Lume to the front. And that is a little bit harder than you would think because it's a big, wide, gaping hole, and Dave's used to that kind of stuff, and you have to apply and mix the resin with the Lume material, make it the right consistency, and actually apply it across so that the film bridges the gap between the two. Pretty tricky to do, but obviously I'm an expert and I got it done first time. No problem at all. So anyway, that was kind of what I did on the first day. What did you get up to in your first day of your travels?
So whilst you were over in Asia, in Hong Kong to be precise, I was jetting the opposite way and we were heading towards New York. I was obviously going there on a work trip because we were heading over to Wind Up Fair in New York. New York has a huge watch event over the period of that, essentially a week. You've got various Red Bar events, watch club meetups, you've got the Watch Time show, and you've got the Wind Up Fair all going on at the same time, and many brands doing little parties, pop-up events, and everything that's watch related pretty much happening in New York. If it wasn't happening in Hong Kong, it was definitely happening in New York. So yes, like you, jumping on a plane, ours was a bit more straightforward, a direct flight from Zurich to New York, so that was relatively straightforward and easy. But we arrived into JFK, which can only be described as one massive building site. An airport that's already pretty big is having the small sum of money of $19 billion spent on it building new terminals, which is quite an eye-watering sum of money, it has to be said. But we quickly got out the airport because airports are not my friend. I don't like them. I'm in them too often. And we headed off immediately to a Red Bar event. Now, there was a little get-together which involved Nicholas from Fears being there, representing Fears. We had the guys from Studio Underdog, we had the guys from Christopher Ward there, and of course we had the guys from Formex. We didn't join in on that first event, but we did join them at a couple of events after, so we had a very nice night, meeting everyone, catching up with Kathleen, catching up with Adam, and of course all the guys from the brands, and all of the Red Bar members from all over the world that had descended on the city. So that was a long day from flying to the US and immediately going to an event, and of course drinking, because that's what you do at these types of events. But then we managed to get into our beds because the very next day was the build up and the start of the show. So we had to do a bit of booth building, a bit of preparation and such like on that first day. But we also managed to get a little bit of time to go a wandering, and of course being into watches, we spent our time looking around various boutiques and such like all over New York City. And like most of the big city metropolises, there are a boutique or so for every brand you can possibly imagine. There were also a couple of the AD retailers in the area doing some events with brands that maybe weren't necessarily showing at one of the shows. So we popped in to see a few of those guys. We met up with quite a few people that we had not that long ago seen over at Geneva Watch Days. So we spent a bit of time having some drinks and nibbles, talking with a lot of friends from the industry. And that evening we had a lovely little warm-up party that was very graciously hosted by Tudor in the Tudor and, as it turns out, Rolex boutique. It was one side Tudor, one side Rolex. It was a Tudor event, but we got to wander around the Rolex boutique as well. So that was rather nice. We got to see some lovely people and some, of course, lovely watches. Didn't quite get to see that new Pelagos FXD that we talked about in the last show, but I'm sure they knew that, and it was probably sitting in their safe ready for the launch that we just talked about. Then it was day one of the show, and all I can say was it was pandemonium. Pandemonium in a good way. There was a massive queue outside that took a considerable number of hours to get everyone filtered into the building. Obviously, the Wind Up Fair is free to enter for consumers, so there's nothing to stop people getting there and getting in, other than, of course, if the fire marshal decides that there's too many people in the building. They had told us they expected between 5,000 and 6,000 people to visit the show over the 3 days. It turns out that at some points there were 5,000 people in the building at one moment in time. So the show ended up being considerably busier than even the organisers had hoped for. Obviously, most of the friends of us at the podcast and of course us at Araj were all at the show, so we got to see some amazing brands and some amazing products there. A few new brands that are well known but maybe aren't talked about so much are making their way back onto the show floor as well, so we got to see some of the other brands that maybe haven't been seen on the show floor so much are back out there showing off their wares, and Fortis had a great big stand there, so we got to have a good look at what they're up to as well. Rob Nudd, who's done the rounds, been a little bit with Nomos, obviously been at Fratello in the past, is also currently working with Arcanaut, but as doing a little bit of work with Fortis as well. He was seen skulking around the show, and of course I got to shout some abuse at him from a distance because, well, Rob Nudd likes a bit of abuse. Outside of that though, yep, that was for us pretty much the end of day one, which was a Friday. But so that you don't hear me droning on, let's go back to Ricky and see what he got up to on the third middle part and the end of his trip to Hong Kong.
Well, I caught up with Alfred Chan, watch designer extremo. He's the guy that produced, designed the Astroworks 1, a watch we got sent last year that I fell in love with because it was under $1,000. It was black, it was blue, it was a regulator, it had tons of cool things about it. And he's also had a hand in many other watches. So I grabbed a hold of him and said, do you want to come on the show and explain what it's like to design watches from start to finish? Loads of different ways of doing it, lots of different styles, lots of different designs. He's not the type of guy that makes a watch that looks like the last one. So he's agreed to come on, so that was fantastic. Then Wei Ko, Hind, and a couple other people joined on stage to talk about a new thing that Dubai Watch Week are doing. It's basically where people get involved and they can help design a brand new watch. And the watch that was first created was in association with a guy called Justin, and it was a world timer that didn't use hands, but it used mystery discs. A little bit like the Mr. Jones watch we talked about in the last edition. Yeah, it kind of came together. It had a Porsche design feel to it, maybe a little bit vintage IWC, something like that. And they also had somebody on stage from Roberto Henix, and they're the guys that actually produce a lot of the watches that you may know and love. So there was lots of stuff, lots of chats back and forward on stage with different folks. So that was actually day one. Day two kicked off. Wednesday had breakfast with Alan from, well, he used to be with Beyond the Dial, that's his own thing. He's now working for the Rob Report, so he's gone up in the world. So yeah, I had a good chat with him about things. He's going to be on the show because he's got a story that he's been working on for a number of years. It's nearly done. And he was looking to partner with a watch podcast, and obviously he knows us very well, and he asked if he could come on and chat. So probably December, January time, there's going to be a hot story he's involved with that we're going to break with him. Then it was off to the show. The first thing I did wasn't loom painting today, it was creating a clock out of tin, which sounds quite complex, but in actual fact, it was like working in prison in America, stamping out license plates. And this way, we're actually stamping out the face of a clock. So yeah, pictures will be in the show notes. And if you're watching us on YouTube, as Dave likes to say, you'll see the right in front of you, obviously. Then there was a few other things we did. There were a couple of panel discussions, the watch starter pack, where people within the industry were on stage, Fiona Kruger, Bertrand from Moser, and they were taking ideas from the people sitting in the audience about how to create a watch brand, a theme, a style, a gimmick, marketing, all the stuff that goes behind it. And within the space of 1 hour, they'd thrown together some ideas, a watch that may not launch, which obviously will not launch. And it was quite good to see how these types of people work on their feet. Fiona was the design, Bertrand was obviously the brand, you had Suzanne Wong there, she was hyping things up from a PR aspect. It was just really, really good to see all these different ways of doing things, lots of different talks, and having that interaction with the audience. So again, next year when it's over in Dubai, I recommend, if you can, get across, get involved in these things, because like Dave says, what he was up to, everything's free of charge.
So what were we up to next? Obviously, this Saturday involved another long day on the show floor, but that turned out to be the busiest day in the history of Wind Up. So much so, as I mentioned earlier, that the fire marshals in New York decided to restrict entry to the building because they were actually hitting the capacity of the entire building, which was a 2-floor affair. It's a space that's now used as an exhibition space, but previously I believe was a department store. So that will give you some idea of the context of the size of the building we're talking about. So yes, indeed, very, very busy. That was another fabulous day. We met many folk, including Jody, who I got to meet for the second time, who had made it all the way over from Australia. His first ever show with his brand, getting to show his wares and all of his different models. Spent a little bit of time looking over his new releases, and he had a fabulous time. He was loving it, getting to talk to all of the people that have watched much of the content that he's produced. But of course, with him being in Australia, most of them have never met him in real life. Pretty much like us up until about a year ago. So yes, that was really nice to see him as well. We had a great position. We had Anordain and Pollen on one side, and we had Studio Dog on the other side. So we were very much surrounded by friends, everyone being as busy as everybody else. Then after the event, we decided to go party hunting. And we've talked about this brand a few times over the last couple of podcasts, that being Ulysse Nardin, and we heard that they were hosting a little secret party. So we went sniffing and hunting, and we bumped into Andrew Morgan. who was also sniffing this party out as well. And we managed to get together, find the party, and we managed to wiggle our way in, even though we weren't technically on the list, but we managed to get in. Turned out it was a very intimate affair, quite a small room, very heavily packed, and a great bar. So yeah, jumped in there. Matthew was not actually there because I believe he was jet setting off somewhere else in the world, but the rest of his senior team and marketing team were all there in full effect. So that was a rather nice end to a Saturday, a nice way to chill out, not think too much, and of course drink a little bit of alcohol. So that was our Saturday, rounded out, as I said, lovely with a party. So Ricky, I think we're moving towards the back end of your trip. So what got up to you before you ended up on a flying tin box home?
Lots of things happened. I met one of the listeners to the show, somebody that's written in a few times with questions, and that's Anthony. He came across and yeah, he was wearing his Christopher Ward Highlander, one of our early collaboration pieces. So I got a double wrist check with him. What else happened? Then I went back to the hotel, shattered because it was the end of day 2. And the next day, the fatigue had kind of kicked in. But first thing in the morning, I went to the Moser Boutique because I realised it was 0.2 miles away from the hotel. And it was kind of on the way to the event space. And I thought, I'll go in and I'll see what they've got, because there's always different releases that we don't even get to hear about half the time in different locales across the world. And they had a beautiful Fume dial watch that almost looked like a hologram. Depending on how you held it, you would see a hint of colour on the dial, and then it was tilted more towards you. It just exploded. The thing that really got me was two things. On the way there in Hong Kong, you can't just walk across the street. They've got fencing around the perimeter of the streets, so you can't get across the road. You got to go to pedestrian crossing. That was the first thing. And the second thing was, when I walked into the boutique, I walked into the boutique. There wasn't a doorman. There wasn't a kind of staging system with an airlock to stop people running in and stealing stuff and running out. It was completely open. And when I actually asked inside about it, they said, yeah, Hong Kong's absolutely safe. You don't have to worry about stuff like that over here. Something I didn't know about. I'm so used to London, Paris, Milan, New York, places you've really got to be careful what you're wearing on wrist. No, not the case at all over there. Super easy. Walk in, look at some cool watches, and leave. So off to the show. First thing was to meet Fiona Kruger. I'd met her like a couple of nights before, but she was putting on a class where we learned about automatons, and then we created our own ones. Not with metal and stuff like that, but actually with paper. We created a system, very simple. And the thing I was creating, following the guide to the letter, utilising the stuff that was in it, it started off looking like something that it shouldn't really have looked like, but then I carried on really quickly because it started to look like something out of the movie Fletch Lives, and then it didn't, thankfully. So yeah, pictures will be in the show notes of what I'm talking about there. Apart from that, there were a couple more talks about things, the evolution of the collector. That was Barbara Plumbo's talk, where she was chatting with Jackie Ho, who runs a watch group, a little bit like Red Bar across there. I bumped into star guest from the Scottish Watches podcast, episode 50. See if you can remember who that is. I'll tell you who that was. Archie Luxury, Paul Pluta, the Pontiff. He was there. He was stood around randomly at this thing. And I couldn't believe my eyes. So I wandered up. Well, I took a photo first in case he ran away. I wandered up, said hello. He took a selfie of us, asked why the hell he was there. And he said he'd come across to listen to Tim Mosso speak. And that was the next thing. That was the end of the show, the big final curtain closer. Tim Mosso talking about 300 years of clock and watchmaking technology, escapements, balance technologies, things I had no clue about at all. And he went start to finish, didn't stop talking for 1 hour, didn't make a single mistake. And his entire talk is on YouTube. Again, links in the show note. And it reminded me of the one last year with Stephen McDonald that we talk about all the time. It wasn't quite as heartfelt and as passionate, but it was so packed, densely packed with information. It's something that I have watched twice already and I'm still learning from, so I'll probably go back for a third helping. And that was kind of the end of the show. Oh, last thing, before Tim was speaking, another guy who listens to the show, who'd emailed in before, he came across to chat, and that's Alex. I think he was telling me that he works in the building that was right next to my hotel, the Oriental Mandarin, and he was there watching Tim in action. We got a quick wrist check, wrist shot, and then he was off back to work because he had escaped for a little bit of time. And that was it. Went back to the hotel, got sorted, finished up with the evening dinner with Wrist Check, the company. and Barbara left early. She had a plane to catch. I left because I had packing to do, and then that was it. That was the end of the show, but there was one day remaining. I'll get to that in a second. Dave, what happened next with you?
It was the final day of the wind-up, that being the Sunday. Again, another extremely busy day. The New Yorkers definitely felt like they were out there. Now, you mentioned you met a few people who were podcast listeners, and indeed there was more than one also come up to me and said, your voice is very familiar, and it suddenly dawned on them. Unfortunately, I wrote down most of their names, but where that note is slightly past me at the moment, but I promise I will find it, and in a future episode I will give you a name check. But yeah, always nice for people to come up and say how much they're enjoying the show. So that was Sunday, and then on Sunday night we did a little private get-together with a group that Kathleen McGivney from Red Bar had put together, where we just met up with people who were maybe wanting to talk a bit more geeky about watches. Obviously, with what we do at work, a lot of technical work is undertaken, and a few of the individuals wanted to get a deep dive on that technology, a bit like you mentioned Tim Mosso having that discussion about 300 years of technology within the watch industry. We talked about the more modern developments within the watch sphere in Switzerland. So that rounded out Sunday, and we had an early to bed because we had a lot of travel coming up as we were heading off to Philadelphia, and we got in cahoots with the Fears Watch Company, with Nicholas being there, with the guys from Studio Underdog. Rich unfortunately couldn't make it. He had to shoot off home, but his staff were there manning a booth. We had the guys from Formex, we had Marcus, and we had Raphael heading to Philadelphia as well. And of course, we had Mike Pearson from Christopher Ward, and we joined them on an official capacity at a Red Bar event where we all got to show off our wares. We were also all a bit worse for wear, it has to be said, because after a long 3 days at the show, we were all looking forward to our bed. But it turned out to be a great event, really nice little venue, and Philadelphia is a city I can highly recommend. In fact, so much so that we found a little cool sandwich coffee shop, and the guys in there were, let's say, a little bit crazy, but said, oh, why are you guys here? This is a bit of a strange place for tourists to find. We said we found it on Google Maps. They said, oh, cool. They said, what are you here for? We told them that we were into watches, and he immediately dropped a name and said, do you know
Nico Leonard?
No, Cole Pennington, famous for being a writer at Dinky and of course now at Tudor. It turns out that someone he knows is related to knows Cole Pennington, but that caught me a little bit off guard, so much so that we took a selfie and sent it to Cole, who did in turn know exactly who it was I was talking about. So it shows you watches are everywhere, and everyone is always watching and listening. So be careful out there, kids. That was the almost last day. So Ricky, we'll let you finish out, and then I'll give you the finishing tale of my trip.
Well, there were no unintended consequences me getting back, and I'm skipping an entire day of the trip. I'm going to keep that for a future show because I caught up with Vishal from Spinnaker and we spent the day together. It was really good. We did lots of cool stuff. We did some things I'll talk about in the future. I got to go to their headquarters. I got to see things that isn't out until next year. Yeah, and we talked about future collaborations, not just within Scottish Watches Towers, but Second, and other people that we know within the industry. So I will recap that one in the future. But yeah, next up was over 27 hours of travel, not including plus an additional 10 to 12 hours of me being awake before getting on a plane. So it took me from Friday night to Sunday pretty much to get back to Scotland, and I was shattered, and I'm still fatigued, and I'm still not 100% correct, which means the two shows that we've recorded today haven't been the greatest, but hopefully I can fix it in the edit. And that was about it, really. So that was my travels over and done with. Probably time to find out the last bit of Dave's travels, and then we're going to finish up with a couple of watches.
Last bit of Dave's travels involved heading off to Washington, D.C. I'll carry on, but yes, that city was unseasonably warm. In fact, in the Celsius, which is the kind of numbers we use, not the F numbers that the Americans use, it was around 27 degrees, which was not what I was expecting for the back end of October. But we got to go and do a little get-together event that had been put together by a fan or a brand fan of Araj, who has been with the company and following us for many years, and said, when you're next in the US, please come to Washington. I'd like to get a group of people together and we can talk to them about something interesting.
Oh, was it Chris from the Fourth Wheel?
It was not. We were a mere stone's throw, probably shouldn't use that phrase, a mere short distance from the White House in the location we were. We had a great audience there. Very different audience to what we would maybe expect to see at, say, Red Bar or anything else, but it was people that were definitely into their watches. And the more we got talking to them, we found out there was definitely some very interesting characters there, their professions, their backgrounds, and things they've done in life. Many of the things, unfortunately, I'm not allowed to repeat because we were pinky promised into secrecy, but yes, a great audience for those guys there. That rounded out the US leg of our trip. And after that, we were on a train, a plane, and an automobile to get ourselves to Dusseldorf, where we took part in the Watch Time show in Dusseldorf, which, as it turns out, even though it's the same publication that puts on Watch Time in USA, is an entirely different affair. A very different setup, a very different feel to the show. Maybe something like a halfway house between what you would expect at Wind Up and what you'd expect at Watch Time in the US. And we got to engage with the German audience. We were a little apprehensive, as the German audience is known for being very particular about what they do and don't like, but it turned out I shouldn't have been worried. It was a fabulous audience, really engaged. And here's one for you, Ricky, and Barbara I think will appreciate this as well. Turns out that 21% of the audience that attended that show were females who were there of their own volition, not being dragged along by a partner or another half, but being there because they were into watches themselves. Now, that's a number that's considerably higher than we generally expect to see in the UK or the US, so that was certainly something that really pleased me. I had kind of noticed that there were a lot more women than I was expecting to see. I asked the organiser, is this so, or is it just me? And they said, no, you're absolutely correct, 21%, because we do metric everyone that comes in. So that was a really nice little surprise, it has to be said, and we got to talk to a lot of these people, which gave a pretty solid perspective on what they're after. And it turns out what they're after is exactly the same as the guys. Good looking watches that they like wearing, and they don't really care whether they're small or big or indifferent. If they like them, they like them.
Well, there kind of rounds out our travelling trips from the last couple of weeks. It was a lot to take in, probably from both me and Dave, but we're going to finish up the show with two watches, probably at completely contrasting sides of the spectrum when it comes to pricing and technology. Starting off with a heavy hitter, as Philologus would like to say, as long as AI doesn't change his wording, and that's from A. Lange & Söhne, and this is a 30th anniversary piece.
This is indeed so. 2024 marks the 30th anniversary of the Lange 1, possibly the most iconic model that ALS are making or have made. They've got lots of cool watches out there, but I think this is the one that most folk, when they see it, will immediately recognise it as so. They've got two models, but I believe there's ultimately four because there's two different case materials. You either have platinum or you have a warm pink gold option on both. And you've got the Lange 1 and the little Lange 1. I think these are fabulous looking watches, as long as, of course, you like that off-center dial, big date type of vibe that this watch very definitely gives off. Size-wise, you're at 38.5 by around 10 millimeters for the Lange 1, and you're around 36.3, I think, and slightly slimmer on the little Lange. What more can we say? Everything that you would absolutely expect from a Lange 1, with some nice materials, a couple of different sizes. You've got a black onyx making, I think, the first appearance of that material within the Lange 1 family, so that makes it stand out. Obviously something special for the anniversaries. There's 300 pieces each of both the gold and the platinum version of the Lange 1, and there's 150 pieces each in the two materials of the little Lange. Price point, as you would expect, is not so delicate, starting from just over 45,000 euros, going up to around 60,000 euros, depending on size and material that you opt for. If you like it, if you've got the monies, and if you can probably get onto a very long waiting list and get your way through all of the people that will probably get allowed to buy it before you even get a look in, well, you probably want to be contacting your local Lange AD or boutique very quickly, because I have a feeling these will evaporate into thin air as soon as they are available.
Before Dave says, what do you think of these? Are they up your street? Do you like them? Would you wear one? Would you buy one? ALS is a brand that's never been in touch with us. We've never really communicated. They've never sent us a watch to review. And it's not because they're expensive, because we've had Max Busser on the show. We've had the guys from Moser on the show. We've had all kinds of folks on this show, but it's a brand that is around. They don't shout much, When Watches and Wonders happens, they are one of the few brands that you're not really allowed as members of the media to interact with. We can't really go onto the online booking system and book appointments. It's a bit like Rolex in that way, whereas we can grab Panerai, we can grab Vacheron, we can grab IWC. They are there for the taking. ALS are kind of off to the side. So we're going to try and make some inroads to find out more about them, try and get them onto the show, look at some of the products, because Philologus is a big advocate of the brand, and a lot of people have talked about them in the past. It's just the news cycles aren't very favourable towards them because they don't shout a lot about what they do. But a brand that we have shouted about, or two brands that we shout about all the time. One is Zodiac, because they've been on the show a number of times, funnily enough, when Mike was with them, not with Christopher Ward, where he is now, and previously of Bremont and Zoom and Wolf and many other places. But they have collaborated with the folks at eBay. They've got something that's very colourful, very rainbow-esque, but it ain't skeletonized this time.
Now, what have they done? They've got into bed with Zodiac, a brand that one of our friends who's been on the podcast a few times, in fact, been speaking about the brand when he worked for them before he moved to his current role at Christopher Ward, is the Zodiac Super Seawolf eBay collaboration. I'm going to say it. It's a handsome looking watch. Yes, this watch utilises all the colours that you would expect to see on anything branded by eBay. You've got red, you've got blue, you've got yellow, and you've got green. These have been kind of really boldly brought into the design of this watch. Apparently, as the story goes, eBay have kind of seen how vintage, modern, and all sorts of different Zodiacs have been traded on their platform over the years, and they felt time had come to reach out to do a collaboration, and it's all come together. This will only be available via the eBay platform, so you're not going to get it anywhere else, but it's an official eBay product. Water resistance, 200 meters, all the specs you would expect to see from the Super Seawolf, that 1953 inspired design on there as well. It's a super compressor watch, and it comes on the bracelet. Personally, this for me is in the top 10 of collaborative watches that have been done with Zodiac and other companies. Really good looking watch, not too overtly eBay, albeit if you look in the case back, the eBay medallion is on there. But of course, when it's been worn, that's not necessarily going to jump up and smack you in the face every time you look at the watch. So congratulations on this. And I have to say, eBay, when I ran into them, went over in Germany at Dusseldorf, have got some rather on the face of it low cost giveaways, but something that's very clever and well thought out. What is that, may you ask? That is my little eBay watch clip that they were giving away, which is the perfect thing that can be given away by eBay because it encourages you to take good photographs of your watch when you want to actually list them on eBay with the eBay logo and branding on there, so you can make yourself look like a professional seller. Additionally, a little eBay watch cleaner cloth and little mat that you can lay the watch on as well. So some quite clever little giveaways that eBay were giving away, that being eBay Germany, but I'm sure this will be rolling out to other events sponsored because eBay were also at Wind Up in conjunction with Zodiac. They were there with a little kind of additional area on their stand talking about everything that they do, obviously all the services and facilities that they have that allow you to sell your watches. Ricky, in fact, has talked about it from first-hand experience a few episodes ago. So well done, eBay. Great collaboration. And yeah, let's, maybe just keep an eye on Zodiac-related things over the coming months because you never know. There might be a very good number one collaboration that may or may not come up in the future. Is that so, Ricky?
You just never know with Zodiac. They're always doing really cool things with really good collaborators. But that is where the story shall end for this episode. Apologies if it's been a little bit lethargic because we've recorded 2 shows today. We're both still a bit jet lagged and Dave is going to be travelling somewhere shortly, as am I. So that is pretty much it. With this Zodiac release, yeah, it is really funky. The colour scheme's good, limited to 300 pieces. Don't know how many will be available by the time this airs. But obviously check the show notes, click across, and if it's available, you can grab it. Colour scheme's good. I believe Ariel Adams had a hand in it some way, shape or form with the design. Maybe I'm misconstruing something, but I believe that is the case. And all it remains to say is to check our back catalogue. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll remind you, if you can like, subscribe, drop us a comment, and for the next few weeks, definitely check Spotify, check our website, and check our Instagram at Scottish Watches, because it will be more audio centric, going back to our roots for a little bit of time as we regroup, as we stop travelling, and batten down the hatches on the lead up to Christmas. And we've got some great guests coming your way. And that is pretty much it, Dave. Anything we've forgotten?
Nope, nothing major, only the obvious. If you want to contact us, send an email, info@scottishwatches.co.uk. Of course, as Ricky mentioned, check out the back catalogue. And if you haven't done it yet, get yourself onto YouTube. Check out the videos that are on there. There's quite a few to watch through, around an hour per episode. Gavin has been editing away. And if you haven't done it already, tick that little bell and tick that follow button so that you get notified of anything that pops up on YouTube, so that you can watch it as it's hot and fresh. Other than that, I think it just comes down to us saying the whole goodbye thing, Ricky.
Yes, it is a weepy goodbye. But that is us. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you again soon.